Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi, Scalable Investors. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today I have with me Randy Hughes. And Randy is an expert in all things land trust. I wanted to bring him on because I feel like it's such an integral part of every real estate investor's toolkit, and wanted to have him go into detail more about how we can effectively use this on virtually every investment possible. But we'll get into all the fine nuances of using trust as well with Randy. So Randy, AKA Mr. Land Trust, I see on your screen there. How are you doing today? What's going on?
I'm doing great. Considering how the world is doing, I'm in better shape, I think, than most.
Okay. Yeah, it's always good to be in good health and just pushing forward.
It sure is. Health is everything.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we just, I kind of ask every guest this in case you're not familiar with in case our listeners aren't familiar with the speaker. Just tell us about your background, how you got involved in real estate. I know you've been involved for many, many years, so you don't have to tell us every single detail, but maybe a high level and why you feel like land trusts are the end all be all that we should know about.
Okay. Well, this is my 50th year as a real estate investor. So yeah, I've been in the game for a while. And I started out, I'm basically a single family house investor. That's what I've done my whole life. I've gone into some other things, but my main thrust is single family homes as investments. And I probably had 15 houses in my name personally before I woke up to the realization that that wasn't very smart, that anybody could go to the courthouse records and look up what I owned, what it was assessed for, and what the debt was when I financed it. And with those three numbers, you pretty much can figure out my net worth. That's pretty stupid. You know, it's like taping a financial statement to my chest and going to a party at night and saying, here, look at everything I've got, you know, come sue me. So I started investigating different ways of holding title. And I know that most of the folks listening, their attorneys have told them to title their real estate investments in an LLC. And let me just say up front, I use LLCs in my business. I love LLCs, but not to hold the title. And if you just think this through logically, which most attorneys don't, they're just, you know, kind of mechanical, just spit these things out. But if you think it through logically, if you own, let's say, 10 single family rental houses, and you title them all in any one entity, a trust, an LLC, a corporation, any one entity, you're creating a nexus for a lawsuit. So in other words, if you have a lawsuit against one property and they sue and they win, they get a judgment against the owner. Who's the owner? The LLC. Now they got a judgment against everything in the LLC, all 10 of your properties. Not very smart. So I teach my students to put each property into a separate trust so they're all insulated from each other at the title level. And then those trusts can be owned by an LLC or more than one LLC or corporation or whatever structure you want to do. But the first line of defense for us as real estate investors is privacy of ownership, not having your name on the title. That's the cheapest, easiest, quickest thing we can do as real estate investors is not own this stuff in our name. And if we have time, today I'll tell some real life stories that hopefully will impress upon your listeners to never buy real estate in their name again, and anything they own in their name now, get it out of their name as soon as possible.
Okay, I think it'll definitely be helpful hearing some real life examples and seeing how this has benefited people. I know that if you buy it in your own name or an LLC name, that name shows up in the chain of title. So say the lender requires you to put in the LLC name at least, I guess there's still some benefit you can gain from putting it in a trust after closing on the property?
Well, yes, but again, now you've created a paper trail. Most lenders that I know of would not require you to put it into an LLC. They might require you to put it in your own name personally. So if you're getting a conventional loan, for example, a loan that the bank sells to the government, a government-backed loan, they will not let you close directly into a trust. You've got to close in your name personally and then transfer out of your name and into the trust. Now, you can only get 4 of those loans, those government-backed loans, and then they shut you off. So if you're a very active real estate investor, you're going to have a lot more than 4 loans. After you get those 4 loans, which are good loans, they're 30-year fixed-rate loans, but after you get your fill on those, then you're going to have to go to what I call a portfolio lender, and that's a bank that doesn't sell the loan to the feds, and they hold the loan in-house. And many of them will let you go ahead and take title directly from the seller to your trust without you ever being in the chain of title.
Okay. But the beneficiary of that trust, that would still be you, I guess your LLC.
Right. You see, just
Okay.
because you put your property in trust doesn't mean there's no more liability on that property. The liability on the property held in the trust flows through to the beneficiary. And that's why most real estate investors will make the beneficiary of their trust an LLC or a corporation.
Okay. Got it. And I know there's some differences between like a revocable and irrevocable land trust. So could you discuss that and what
Yeah,
you usually use?
yeah. Usually we're using a grantor revocable trust. The revocable means that you can change it, so it's got flexibility. An irrevocable trust, theoretically, you're not supposed to change it, so it has more asset protection. But just to get real estate investors accustomed to this concept, I would not suggest going right into the irrevocable trust. Some of those do require tax returns. The revocable trust, the grantor revocable trust I'm talking about and teaching most of my students about is a type of trust that's disregarded by the IRS, doesn't require a tax return, no tax ID number, and can be easily changed. Yeah, that means there's not a lot of asset protection to those trusts, but that's why I link them together with the LLC to get more asset protection. But again, just by not owning the property in your name will help you avoid a lot of frivolous lawsuits. Let me give you a real life story, okay?
Yeah, sure.
In the year 2000, I sold a house that my wife and I and my 2 daughters lived in. And 6 months after closing, I got a letter from the buyer's attorney. And it said, my buyer had to replace an air conditioning unit, some wood flooring, and all the toilets in the house. And if you'll just send us a check for $8,000, we won't sue you. I mean, really? I'm responsible for maintenance after closing? That's crazy. It's an insane legal theory, but it works in most people because it's intimidating, it's threatening, and most people will write the check and say, just don't sue me, stay away for $8,000. And these charlatans make money hand over fist just sending threatening letters out. Well, I wasn't willing to play the game. I was prepared. And that's a real good point here. You have to be proactive when it comes to asset protection. You can't run out and do it the day you get your letter. So I sent him a letter back and I said, dear Mr. Lawyer, you must have not read your files before you threatened to sue me. I wasn't the owner. He sent me a letter back and said in so many words, well, you tell us who the owner was and we won't sue you. So I sent him a letter back and I said, to my knowledge, the owner was some kind of a trust. And my last line said, good luck. And you know what happened? Nothing. Not even the courtesy of a letter back. Now, why is that? Why do you think that is? It's because it's all a scam. It's all a game to extract money out of good human beings here. And it's just a ridiculous legal system that we have, but it works for a lot of deadbeats. And I wasn't going to play their game. And just by having that property in a trust, even though land trusts aren't touted as asset protection tools, but just by not having it in my name, stop that procedure dead in its tracks. And here's how I envision the conversation went when the deadbeat client talked to his lawyer who had threatened to sue me. And the lawyer said, well, Bob, what do you want to do? You want to chase this trust? And Bob said, hell no, I don't want to spend any money. Let's go sue somebody that owns real estate in their name. I'm not going to spend money chasing some trust. So you see how this works? There's a lot of psychological value to these things.
Okay. And even if you owned it in your name previously, I guess you would still have to pay money to get a chain of pay an abstractor or someone to get that chain of title, right? So that's another
Well, they
barrier.
can, yeah, they can look up the chain of title, but you know, you used to own it and you don't anymore. Now you may still live there, and it's still better to get the property out of your name. There's nothing you can do to change the chain of title, but there are a lot of benefits other than the one I just described. There are a lot of benefits to just not having your name on the title. In fact, I've written a booklet with over 50 reasons to use a trust. And if you want me to, I can give out my website address before this is over, and people are welcome to go get that booklet for free.
Yeah, that'd be great. Definitely send me the link. You can mention it on the episode, but I'll also drop it in the show notes so people can easily just tap it on their phone.
Okay, great. I'd love to give it to them for free.
Okay, great. I noticed on your website you also mentioned personal property trust. So how do those differ from land trust, and how are they all woven together?
Well, it's interesting. I've been teaching this material to real estate investors for a little over 20 years now. And I started out with my basic course, which teaches you how to create a land trust and provides all the forms you need. And probably a year or two after I did that first course, I got a lot of my students were calling me up and saying, hey, Randy, this is great stuff. Can you teach me more? And so I wrote the advanced course. And in the advanced course, I get more into asset protection techniques, linking the land trust together with other entities, including the personal property trust. Now, there are basic personal property trusts, and there are very sophisticated personal property trusts. What I give you in the advanced course are some basic personal property trust agreements, and I teach you how to put your car, your boat, your motorcycle, your shotgun, your hammer, anything you're going to loan to your neighbor and he's going to cut his finger off with, that should go into a separate personal property trust agreement. Now, what's interesting about these land trusts is the beneficial interest in the trust is personal property, not real estate. So if you wanted to hold the beneficial interest in a trust in another trust, you would hold that in a personal property trust. Does that make sense?
Almost. Maybe we could go through from one more angle. So you are not the actual beneficiary. The beneficiary is the other trust. So you're
right. In other words, you can layer this stuff. See, a land trust holds real estate. Real estate's not personal property. A car, a boat, a motorcycle is personal property. And the beneficial interest in a land trust is personal property, not real estate. So if I wanted to put my beneficial interest in the land trust in another trust, it would go into a personal property trust. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I was sorry, I'm being contacted by other people, so I was distracted. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. I thought you were saying that the beneficiary was an inanimate object, like a personal property. So yep, I got it. All right.
Okay.
Moving on. So if I was apprehensive in starting a trust myself, how much would it cost for me to go out and pay an attorney to set one up?
Great question. It depends on what area of the country you're in. I spoke 33 times last year to 33 different real estate investment clubs all over the country. So I have a pretty good feel, because I always ask the crowd, what's the cost in your area? And I've heard as low as $300 and as high as $1,500. Now, a lot of the people who I speak to who think this is a great idea but don't want to do it themselves, I will refer them to an attorney friend of mine. She is on the West Coast, and she's a licensed attorney, and she does trusts all day, every day. That's her business. She charges $1,575 per trust. And that's for every trust. So that's going to get really, really expensive if you follow my philosophy to put each property into a separate trust. That's why I think it's smarter for you to learn how to do it yourself, because my home study course is only $597, and you can create trust the rest of your life at no cost, because it doesn't cost anything to set up a trust like it does an LLC or corporation. There's no franchise tax, there's no fees, nothing. There's nothing to record. The trust agreement is held privately, it's not recorded. So if you're going to be active in this business, it behooves you to learn how to do this yourself, because you're going to save thousands and thousands of dollars in fees by setting them up yourself. Plus, what's a kind of a byproduct is you'll understand them better if you do it yourself.
Okay, so how long does it usually take someone to work through your basic home study course just to get a grasp?
Well, my basic course is 95 pages long. I wrote it every word. It's not a bunch of legalese. It's easy to read and understand. So if you really wanted to get into it, it'd probably take you a couple hours to sit down and read it, back to back. And what's interesting though is all my students get a free membership in my Land Trust University, which is a learning tool online. It's a real university I've developed over the last 10 years. So I feel really good about being kind of ahead of the curve on this online learning concept. So my students can on their phone, they can watch me teach this material to a live audience, going through the forms, explaining everything in the course guide. So it's a great way to learn. Plus, then they have access to me either through phone calls or email. I answer my phone from 7 a.m. Central Time to 9 p.m. Central Time, 7 days a week. Who does that? Who in all of America does that? Nobody that I know. That's how serious I am about giving good service to my students. I want them to learn this stuff and use it, because I know how important it is to protect your assets. It's kind of an oxymoron. The greater success you have in this business, the greater chances are you're going to get sued. So, you work really hard to be successful, and then you're rewarded with a lawsuit. So we're all spending a lot of time and money and effort learning how to make money in this business. You need to take a little bit of time and a little bit of money to learn how to protect those assets along the way.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I did want to go into detail more, when I first heard you speak in our other group, you had mentioned there was this video you were speaking with another attorney who does this for a living. He tries to sue different real estate investors. But could you elaborate more on that and how he explained that it was basically impenetrable using your strategy?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was speaking in Southern California about 4 years ago, and at the end of the speech, this guy came up to me who'd been sitting in the back of the room. And he came up to me and he started speaking to me, and I said, wait a minute, we got to get the cameras going for this because this is too good. So we started the cameras rolling, and he basically said, I'm an attorney here in Southern California. My job is to discover assets and try to break these things apart that you're talking about. He said, what you just described, I can't break. He said, I've tried, I understand what you're saying, I can't break it. And I said, well, that's quite a compliment. I appreciate you admitting that, and because not everybody believes you when you talk about this stuff. They may think it's all esoteric and theory, but doesn't really work in real life. So it was a great testimonial. He's since become a friend of mine. Whenever I'm out in Southern California, we get together and have lunch or dinner. He's, in fact, he just contacted me earlier this week with a deal he's working on, and he wanted to ask me what was the best way to use the trust as far as selling on an installment contract. I do a lot of that, and I love doing that, being the bank, but we don't have enough time to get into that. But it was a great story, and I've got it in my PowerPoint presentation now, his video testimony.
Okay. Could you just discuss a little bit more though how you'd usually go about it and what prevents him from kind of peeling back the onion layers?
Well, the concept that I was speaking about that day is something very unique that I've developed, to my knowledge, nobody else on planet Earth is doing. And it evolved out of a situation, well, about 6 years ago, when an attorney bought my home study course. And I have a lot of attorneys that buy my home study course because then they learn how to do it and they charge people $1,000 for every trust. So more power to them if they can do that. But this attorney called me up and he was out of Virginia. He said, Randy, this is great stuff. Do you have anything else? And I said, yeah, I got the advanced course. So he bought that. And then he called me up and I, in the general conversation, I said, what kind of an attorney are you? And he said, I'm a Native American attorney. He said, I travel all over the country defending Native American interests. I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure how that works. Tell me how it works. And he says, well, 99% of the time I go into court and say, Your Honor, you don't have jurisdiction here. And he said, it pisses him off, but it's true. And typically the case is dropped. And I said, well, what legal theory are you operating? He said, well, there's the federal law and there's Indian law and then there's state law. And I said, wait a minute, you're telling me that the Indians trump the state? And he says, in most cases, yes. I said, so if you were my trustee and someone tried to sue my trust in state court, they couldn't do it. And he said, no, they'd have to take the court, they'd have to take the case to tribal court. And there's less than 0.5% of the lawyers in the United States that are allowed to practice in front of tribal court. They have to take a 2-week class and be accepted by the tribe. So what we're trying to do here is up the ante for any adversary to have to go to federal court, which is much more expensive than state court. So I suggested to this gentleman, I said, you need to start a trustee service. And he did. And he's been serving as trustee for many of my students for years. And that's the concept I was talking about that day when the attorney said, I can't bust that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, really the only person listed that's connected to that trust is the trustee. And then especially if that trustee is out of court using some PO box, it's really difficult to understand even who to contact and litigate against, right?
Right, right.
Okay. And I know that we discussed different states have different trust laws. And so which are some of the best states to set up a trust in? And what's that process like to buy an out-of-state asset using that?
Yeah,
applying to the in-your state using out-of-state trust. Yeah.
Right. Well, first, it's important, Mason, to understand there's no federal land trust law. It's all state by state. And the states many, many years ago agreed to what's called the Full Faith and Credit Act, which means they all are going to honor each other's laws. And even though there are only 6 states that actually have a land trust statute, all states do recognize the validity of a land trust. So in my opinion, some states have better land trust statutes than others. Like Florida and Virginia, for example. I live in Illinois. All my investment properties in Illinois, but I don't use Illinois land trusts. And no matter what state I lived in, I'd probably not use that state's laws unless they were just superior to everybody else's. I would want to use an out-of-state trust. There are some asset protection benefits that we don't have time to go into right now, but I explain them in detail in my home study courses. There are asset protection benefits to using an out-of-state trust and an out-of-state trustee. And so all these are like kind of little baby steps, not one thing is going to protect you 100%, but when you start stacking them up and throwing out obstacles, you can protect yourself. And let's clear something up, Mason. I don't teach people this information to go out and take advantage of people. If you sign a note, if you make a promise, you should pay that bill. I have never paid a mortgage payment late in 50 years. I've never reneged on a promise. I don't believe in that. But I also don't believe you have the right to attack me and my family for some frivolous lawsuit and try to take my assets away that I've worked for years to get. That's just the way I look at it. And hopefully you and your listeners will take that to heart, because there are a lot of people out there, especially now, that would do anything to take your hard-earned assets away from you. And if you don't learn how to protect them, you're at risk. And I've got one more story before we end that I think will really drive that point home.
Okay, sure.
You want me to tell it now?
The stage is yours.
All right. So in 1985, I bought a shopping center with a friend of mine, and I insisted on putting the title to that shopping center in a trust. In the year 2000, he moved out of Illinois and moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and became a very successful real estate developer, made millions of dollars a year. Until when? You got an idea, Mason?
Probably when everyone lost their money in 08, 09.
Very good. 2008, the world came crashing down on it. And the last time I talked to him, he said he had $23 million worth of liens and judgments against him. But I was only concerned about one. And that one was a bank in Florida who came all the way back up here to Illinois. Now, mind you, he hasn't lived here for 15 years at that point. The bank in Florida comes back to my town and files a lien in his name. It's called a memorandum of judgment. It's like throwing a wet blanket over everything that's owned in his name for $3.2 million. Now, Mason, if I had not insisted on putting the title in a trust and he and I had gone on the deed together, I would have just lost everything. Could you imagine going to your spouse, your significant other tonight and saying, honey, we lost everything today because of something somebody else did? That's not a good conversation to have. $3.2 million because of something he did. I was not involved in anything he did down there. But if you go on a deed with somebody, it's like being married. Everything that happens to them happens to you. And you can lose it all over something they did. So please, if you don't do anything else, don't get any other points out of this presentation, go away understanding that you don't put your name on the deed for real estate. It's too darn risky. You get all the same benefits if in a trust, tax benefits, principal reduction, cash flow, all that still flows through to you. So if you get all the benefits without all the negatives, why would you not use a trust? It's just logical to use a trust.
Right. Are there any transactions where you feel like you wouldn't be able to and you have to do it later?
Wouldn't be able to use a trust?
Yeah.
No, I always use a trust. Always, always. You can't give me a piece of real estate if I got to put my name on it. Just keep it. I don't want it.
Okay. So it's not like unique circumstances where it's owner financed or something like that.
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, when I buy with owner financing, Mason, I have the owner put the property into a trust first, and then I buy the beneficial interest in the trust from them. And that works really, really well. Same thing when I'm selling. I love being the bank and selling, buy low, sell high. There are a tremendous number of people out in America today, Mason, that can't qualify for a loan. They're good people. They got money. They've got income, but they're self-employed less than 2 years. Their credit score isn't high enough. They're in the cash business. Something's preventing them from buying a house, and I want to step up and sell them that house because I'm going to mark it up, and I'm going to make 7% interest on my equity. I'm going to make a nice down payment, nice equity in it, and a nice cash flow every month. But the risk involved, as you probably know, Mason, is what if they stop making payments? And that's the rub. If you do it the conventional way and you just sell them the house on a contract and they default, you have to foreclose. Foreclosure is expensive and time consuming. I sell them the beneficial interest in the trust. Remember I said, Mason, that's personal property? So if they default on that contract, I repossess. I don't have to foreclose. That's huge. That's a huge difference because I can repossess in 30 days. It takes me almost a year to foreclose. So that kind of solved the risky part of selling on a contract by using a trust. Just one of the many, many benefits to using these trusts.
Okay. And 30 days to repossess, is that nationwide or specific states?
Well, you'd have to check your state law on termination of a contract, but what I do is I send out 3 notices, and if they don't make their payment, and that last notice says we're going to terminate the contract and repossess the beneficial interest. I have my attorney serve as escrow agent. He holds all the original documents. And that's just not only for my protection, but for the buyer's protection. If I disappear, die, go crazy, whatever, I want them to be able to continue to perform, pay off the contract, and get the property in their possession. So I think that's fair both ways. And that's how I do business. I'm always going to be fair, but I'm going to protect my interests and my family just as strongly as you should protect your interests and your family.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So that the actual deed to the property is held by the trust, and then those beneficial interests are just being traded around here. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we go, like, what are the documents that are usually needed? You mentioned a trust agreement, but there's also like a deed to trustee. What other documents are required for a trust?
Well, that's really all you need, Mason, to create the trust, a deed and a trust agreement. All the other forms that you would get from me in my home study course are administrative forms. Like, what if you want to change the trustee? You want to change the beneficiary? You want to appoint a director? You want to have a board of directors, a board of trustees? All that kind of stuff is something you can do down the road if you want to. But the heart of it is the deed to trustee and the trust agreement.
Okay. And deed to trustee, is that literally just what it sounds like?
Well, it's very much like a warranty deed, but it's got some extra language in it, and part of that extra language states, for example, that the beneficial interest in this trust is personal property. You wouldn't find that in a standard warranty deed.
Okay. Great. And I think one thing too, I was reading on a Bigger Pockets post, and I noticed you had replied, there was some back and forth. Just wanted to clarify for our listeners the term grantor. Like, you as setting up the trust, you are the grantor, and then you're also the beneficiary. So there's nothing that can unravel your trust after it's set up. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, most of the time the grantor is also the beneficiary, but not necessarily. Let me give you an example how that would work.
Yeah.
Let's say I have an adult handicapped daughter, and I want to get her income because she can't work, and but I want to provide income for her, but she could never make the financial decisions necessary to operate this trust or the real estate inside the trust. So I could be the grantor, put a piece of real estate that I own into a trust that she's the beneficiary of. Then I would retain what's called the power of direction. And that means I got the power to tell the trustee what to do. Sell the property, finance the property, whatever I say goes. Because my daughter's never going to have the ability to do that. But she needs the income. So the income's going to flow to my daughter, but the decisions will remain with me. So there'd be an example of where I'd be the grantor, but not the beneficiary, is my point.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe that's how a bunch of these, I guess you always hear about trust fund babies. Maybe that's how that's set up.
Don't you wish you were one?
That'd be nice. Yeah, just kind of hanging out and, getting paid.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've hit the major points here. Obviously, they can go on your website to learn more about the intricacies of this. So what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you and learn more about trust?
Well, go to my website. My phone number and email address are on there as well. So let's just start with the website address. It's Land Trusts, that's trusts plural with an S, Land Trusts Made Simple.com. landtrustsmadesimple.com. And like I said, that booklet is in the upper right-hand corner. You can text to a phone number I give you and get the 50 reasons to use a trust for free. There's a lot of free information on that website. And then if you have an interest, you can, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link that says products, and you can look at my home study courses.
Okay, got it. And there's certain like hard tangible materials, and there's also download versions, right? There's like DVDs.
Right. Yes.
video versions? Okay.
Well, it used to be DVDs. Now it's a USB. If you
Oh,
buy
yeah.
a hard copy, you get a USB key that has everything on it. If you get a download, it's all the same material, but the download all comes to you immediately. And then, of course, you have access online through the Land Trust University to my videos. If I invent a new form or update a form, it's all in Land Trust University. I'm the only guy on the planet writing a Land Trust newsletter. It's there. I do a monthly coaching call for my students. The last 10 years worth of calls are recorded and in there by subject matter. I have a list of land trust friendly lenders, land trust friendly insurance companies. So everything land trust is in the university. It's really a cool learning tool.
Okay. And do you have like a Facebook group as well that people
I
can connect with
do.
each other?
I do. Facebook is under Land Trust Made Simple. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, either under Land Trust Made Simple or Mr. Land Trust. Um, and I'm on YouTube as well. I've got a lot of videos on YouTube where I verbally explain some of those 50 reasons in the booklet that I give you for free. I think I've got 22 or 25 videos verbally explaining those reasons as well. So I'm out there trying to spread the word about how important it is to not own this stuff in your name.
Yeah, or the LLC name. I think that's what really stuck out to me is I have everything in the LLC name, but it seems
Well,
like certain states you can go on.
the other problem with an LLC, Mason, is that I can look up who owns an LLC. Unless you form that LLC in Wyoming or New Mexico, they don't publish it. Everybody else publishes it. So you don't have any privacy of ownership. I can look up who owns your LLC. So it's just another reason to start with a trust and then make the beneficiary your LLC, because there's no registry for beneficiaries of land trust. You can't look up who owns a land trust.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to poke holes in my LLC. One last thought, and it seemed like the officers and managers are be listed on a public information report, but it said it's not public information, but it is for other LLCs. I guess I don't know if people can request that information because it exists somewhere in the Secretary of State records, but I'm not sure how familiar you are with Texas, but it probably varies by state.
It does vary by state, and I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, it's just Wyoming and New Mexico that don't publish that information
Okay.
or make it available online.
Right. Yeah, I guess Wyoming LLC is a whole nother conversation. So
It is. I
good to
like
know.
Wyoming. I like Wyoming. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for taking the time, and I hope this is helpful to everyone to shed some light on this tool.
All right. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Mason.
You're welcome. Okay, thanks again for tuning in. First, before I provide a summary of the episode, I want you to know that nothing in this episode should be construed as legal advice or relied upon. Obviously, we're not attorneys barred in any state, and we're not purporting to be providing legal advice. Just have to say it. But first thing that I thought was interesting in this episode is that land trusts are your first line of defense for asset protection, although not necessarily because of the legal protection that an LLC will provide, but the privacy of it to make it very difficult for contingency fee lawyers or other lawyers to find you and, be able to extrapolate how many different assets you own and sue you. But that's also why you need to be sure to put the LLC as the beneficiary of that trust. So that way you still are afforded the legal protection that an LLC otherwise does provide. Another thing is to keep in mind is that you can set up trust yourself. It doesn't have to be something you pay an attorney to do every time, like an LLC. Personally, for our transactions, we do have to pay our attorney for the LLC side of things because they have to do certain documentation every time. We just want to make sure it's all clean cut. It's like $300 per transaction, but I don't really see a need to pay another attorney another $300 to $1,500 to set up the trust as well. So for me, I thought it makes a lot of sense to, learn how to do it yourself so that it's free and go from there. Another thing that I took note of was obviously never put properties in your own name, but also not in your LLC's name, because across many states, with the exception of Wyoming and New Mexico, it's eventually possible to look up who the owners of the LLC are, so it's not really providing that privacy again. And the last thought on this was that revocable land trusts are considered pass-through entities by the IRS, and so you're still getting all of the same tax benefits that you're able to get by using your LLCs. And again, the LLC is a beneficiary. You're going to be recognizing all the income and all the depreciation and everything else on your P&L for tax reasons. So it shouldn't really have any impact there. I hope this was all helpful. Again, if you feel inclined to do so, please leave a review if you feel like you gain anything of value from this or other episodes, and hope to have you back on listening to more episodes going forward. Thanks a lot.